So dividing polynomials, and we're going to be doing it this time by trinomial. Last 2 days, we've been doing it with, we have 2 rows. Because we're dealing with a trinomial, we're going to have 3 rows. So every time you draw one of these, you need to have, if you draw it by hand, you'll need to include 3 rows. And the columns are going to be made up of however many you'll need. And we'll kind of figure out how to judge it here in a minute. But right now, just draw several columns. We can always add in more columns if you need to. But on this first one, this should be good. So the first problem, and this is the problem that's in the top left-hand corner of your paper. It says 4x cubed minus 2x squared plus 10x minus 9. We're going to take all of that and divide it by So when we are doing the rows, you have to have it go down in order. You have the x squared, then the x, then the number. Or the x cubed, x squared, x number. So you can't skip. So what did we skip when we were dividing? So what is skipped here? Between the x. So you have a 0x. This is not written, but it's skipped. And so you have to have that. Even though for most of the time in that row, you're going to have 0. The only one that's going to be different is your remainder. Now, we are going to put the x squared here and the negative 1 here. What goes in the top left-hand corner box?
4x cubed.
So if the next row has a 0 in it, what is going to be in that row?
0.
It's going to be a 0x squared. What is going to be in the bottom row?
Negative 1x squared.
No. So you take the 4 times the negative 1, so negative 4,
Negative 1x.
negative 4x. As each time we step down a row, we're losing a degree on our x. So that means it goes from x cubed, x squared, x. So out of that first column, what number will divide into each of those evenly?
4x.
So 4x. Now let's do our next column. So to get that, we need to have our diagonals drawn in. So get your highlighters out. And highlight like what I'm highlighting. So what I highlighted in yellow is going to combine to give me that negative 2x squared. So if I have a 0x squared, what do I need to combine with that in order to get that negative 2x squared? Now that you have to create that top row, you're going to be looking to see what diagonals combine to create. Then from there, once you have that top row created, you're going to use that coefficient to help you create the next rows. So negative 2 times 0 is?
0.
So that's going to be that 0 row. So 0, we step down 1 in the degree. So x. Now to get the next row, negative 2 times that negative 1 that's over here. It'll be 2. And then we step down 1 in the degree. So do we have any more x's left?
No.
So now we're going to look at the orange diagonal. We have negative 4 plus 0, and I need to get to 10. What needs to be that last spot?
14.
14. And it needs to be a... Now, this is where it gets... Oh, I forgot to put it up here. So, remember back we talked about that we would always have to step down 1? So, x, this would be your number. What's the next column after you have the number? What column?
Remainder.
This is our remainder column. This column is going to act different. And this column, you're just going to fill in by the diagonals. So 2 plus what is negative 9? Negative 11. So that column, the remainder column, is going to behave different than any of the other columns. And I forgot to check in, what can we factor out of the column before that?
Negative 2.
So our answer is 4x minus 2 with the remainder of
14x minus 11.
and that's your entire answer. I know on the whiteboard you can't highlight, but you can use these whiteboard markers to either circle or draw a line behind your diagonals so you can see them. Now let's do another one. Oops, I forgot to give myself room to write it. So we are going to take this time the quotient of 2x to the 4th minus 11x squared minus 30x minus 27, and we're going to take that whole thing and divide it by x squared plus 2x plus 3. This time, because the degree that we started with is 1 larger, we're going to need 1 more column. So last time we needed 3 columns, so this time we're going to need 4 columns. So go ahead and draw your box. You're still going to need 3 rows. And if you want to go ahead and highlight, you can go ahead and highlight. And then write down the x squared, 2x, and 3. And what goes, where does the 2x to the fourth go?
That top left.
So this time I'm not going to have that 0 row. It's going to have numbers in each of the spots. Now they could end up being, some of them being 0, just because that does happen sometimes. I wrote I put the 0x cubed there because it skipped. And that way, whenever I'm going back and giving you the color, I gave the colors of the diagonals. If you notice up there, I highlighted it with a color. And there wasn't a spot for me to highlight that, so I went ahead and drew it underneath. The only reason I don't highlight that first box is there's no need to highlight that one spot. If you want to, you can. There's no need to, I don't feel like. And so now we're going to create go down that column. So we take the 2, and we're going to multiply it by that 2, and what does it become?
4x.
And we go down 1 in the degree, so 4x cubed. We're going to take that top 2, we're always going off this top number, and multiply it times the 3, and what does that become? 6x squared. And if you notice that what I've highlighted in green, those should be x cubed. What I highlighted in orange should all be x squareds. And what I have the background of yellow should all be x's. And the other ones are going to be all numeric numbers, like 5, the constant numbers.
This times this is that.
What number am I able to factor out of those 3?
2x squared.
Now let's take the next column. So the 4x cubed is what's going to help us create this next spot. What do I need to create? What do this x cubes need to sum up to?
0.
0.
Negative. So negative 4x cubed.
So it needs to be negative 4 to cancel out. So negative 4 times 2 is?
Negative 8 x squared.
And then you take that negative 4 times the 3.
Negative 12x.
Okay.
You did, what'd you multiply?
The negative 4 from that top row
Mm-hmm.
times the 3.
Okay.
So now I've created that column. Out of that column, what number can factor out?
4, negative 4x.
Negative 4x. And when you're choosing your sign, always choose a sign from the row that's closest.
Like
And so
negative 4 times.
now we're going to look at the next column. So which one is going to help us determine what to start with?
Orange.
So
The orange, the x squared.
Negative 11. So right now we're at like negative 2, so we need a negative 9.
So we,
Squared. Oh, what'd you get?
so we need to create 6 plus a negative 8 plus something needs to equal a negative 11. And so that something is at negative 9. So now I'm going to use that to help me fill in the rest of the column. So negative 9 times a positive 2 is a negative 18. And it's going to be an x. Negative 9 times a positive 3 is going to be a negative. And there is no x on that. Now we're going to, what can factor out of those 3 spots?
Negative 9.
Negative 9.
Is the next column remainder?
The next column is going to be your remainder. After you've done your constant, the next column is your remainder. And so our remainder column, remember the remainder column acts and behaves a little bit different. We're not going to be dealing with worrying about the multiplication. We're just going to fill in the diagonals.
Well, we already have the yellow, so would that be just 0x?
So the yellow is already there, so it's 0.
And then the other one target is 0.
So that means it divided evenly. That means there's 0 remainder.
Because negative 12 is
So that means the answer to that division is at 2x squared minus 4x minus 9. There is no remainder on this one. That means it factored in, if I was to multiply those two factors, the one on the side and this, it would multiply to create that original problem. On this one, you are doing 8x cubed plus 14x squared plus x plus or minus 2 is the base, and it tells us the height is at 2x plus 1. So if you have the volume, that's not the base, that's the volume, and we have the height, we can divide those two things to find the area of the base. And so we're going to take this and divide it by that 2x plus 1. So in the past, every single time we've had that top row have a 1. And then the next row was multiplying by whatever that row was, whatever that coefficient. This time, that top row has a 2. So the 2 is here. So remember, our answer up here is what's being multiplied to create each of these rows. So if I would have taken that top row, that answer, and multiplied it by 2 before I got to this, I got 8. What would have been up there on that top row for the number?
4x squared.
4 and an x squared is correct. So you can take and divide these two things, the 8x cubed divided by 2x, and that creates that top spot. Therefore, what is 4x squared times 1? So 4x squared, now that we have that, we can go back to using our diagonals like we're used to. And so 4x plus what is going to be 14x? So what is the relationship between the first row and the second row? Half. So 5x. That diagonal needs to create a 1. So that's going to be a 4x.
Would it be negative 4x?
Oh, yes, thank you. Negative 4x. I forgot to write the negative.
And then it would have to be negative 2x, right? Below it?
Negative 2x. Perfect.
Or negative 2.
Oh, no, negative 2, yes, because we already used the x. And then that last diagonal
0.
is going to give us what?
Which is 0.
We need to have 0 for that remainder spot. So that means, again, it divides evenly. What factors out of the second column?
5x.
Positive or negative?
Positive.
What divides out of that third column?
Negative 2.
So my answer is the area of the base is equal to 4x squared plus 5x minus 2.